Hello and welcome to today's episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower, Sterling's social media manager. Welcome. And just a reminder that we do go live every Tuesday across LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube at 1 p.m. Eastern. So I'm super excited to have Alla Schay here with me. She is the General Manager of Industrials, Government, and Education for Sterling. And today we're going to be discussing from factories to classrooms, reestablishing a foundation of trust and safety to successfully open and stay open amid COVID-19. So Alla, thank you for joining me. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself for our audience?
Excellent. I really appreciate you having me on. And I'd love to introduce myself. I'm Alla Schay. I head up our Industrials, Government, and Education vertical as General Manager of that vertical. I've been with Sterling for over 13 years, so seen a lot of change.
Long time.
I've seen a lot of change in the company and certainly in the industry. And of course, this year has brought one of the most profound changes. So excited to talk about that. So that's a little about me.
That's great. So again, thank you for being with us today. So you did mention that you are the general manager of our Industrials, Government, and Education vertical. Can you please give us a background and kind of the scope of that business for us?
Of course, yeah. So in my role as general manager, I'm responsible and accountable for all of the market-facing functions, including client support, including marketing, including product, and I also oversee fulfillment. So within the vertical, we ensure that the full screening needs of our clients are addressed, taken care of, and integrated in how we formulate our solutions and support strategies. And in terms of the vertical, so as our name from factories to classrooms implies, we cover a broad set of industries and segments of the U.S. economy. So as it relates to factories and industrials, we cover industries from manufacturing to transportation to energy to oil and gas. And so the companies that we represent, I'm really proud to say, Sterling overall represents about 25% of the Fortune 500, and roughly 40 of those clients are within our vertical. So we have the honor really of supporting some of America's leading companies. And many of those companies, again, as it relates to the topic at hand, have been essential businesses that have been operating throughout the course of the pandemic. As it relates to classrooms and both public and private and the government portion of the vertical, we support state and local governments and certainly both public and private educational institutions.
Yeah, so that's a great overview and obviously a huge section of our organization. So really happy again to be here to talk about it. So let's get into our topic a little bit more right now, but just a little bit of a side note for our audience that is watching right now. Feel free at any time to go into the comment section across LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. And if you have a question for Alla, go ahead and ask her and I'll make sure I feed her some great questions throughout the broadcast today. So let's go ahead and get into it. So COVID-19 screening, health testing and things like that, it's a new dimension right now for the existing challenge of providing a safe work environment. So in regards to our clients, what have you been seeing and helping clients do to maintain their business, whether it was, while everything was, really starting during this pandemic and currently right now?
Great. No, I appreciate the question for sure, because there were so many unknowns back in March, April timeframe. And so what we saw early on, and actually, interestingly, and by the way, any client names I'm going to share in the course of our discussion today are ones that have either already been public or have been exposed to the public or have given me permission. And so in reflecting on your question, what I wanted to mention was a event that we had with one of our long-term clients, Siemens, very early on in the pandemic, I want to say in the March, April timeframe. And what Siemens shared is that they, as an essential business, in order to maintain their operations, had integrated temperature checks for anyone that had to be in a facility or a plant. And so that we saw pretty consistently amongst our client base. But our primary concern at that point in time, understanding that our clients, some of them having to continue to hire and bring employees on board, and in some instances, even temporary employees, like in the case of Siemens that needed to bring on temporary staff to do the temperature checks. We needed to ensure that our operations continue to operate. And so it's one of the strengths, having said that I've been with the company for as long as I've had, I've seen the strength of our agility play out now into massive changes in the business environment. One, back in 2008, so post the crash of the market, we were able to be really agile and come out of that very strong. And likewise here, which I would say is probably the second largest significant business event in our history, where we also were able to pivot really quickly to be able to continue to provide our clients with really timely criminal records, leaning into the technology that we have by which we extract court information to allow for a faster and more quality deliverable for our clients. So we were able to lean into that, and even when many courthouses were closed, we were able to continue to provide criminal records and perform on that aspect, as well as all other aspects of the background check, with virtually no impact to turnaround time. So early on in the pandemic, that was really what we focused on, both on the fulfillment side, but also on the client service and support side. Part of our pivoting included ensuring that we made our teams operational and engaged in a work from home environment to support our clients, so that for those clients like Siemens or Universe or other essential businesses that have had to continue to operate, we were there for them. What we have seen more recently, I would say probably as of the last 2 months, is that businesses have started to transition as more employees come back into work. And as businesses themselves have started to explore the landscape of COVID testing, businesses have started to transition their mindset into how can I do this in a better way, in a more controlled and centralized way. So that's definitely something that we've been very focused on in the last 2 months in supporting our clients.
So so I think it was great. So you talked about early on the last 2 months, kind of where do you see the shift maybe in, the coming weeks, the coming months? Like, what is that next shift, do you think?
Sure. So I guess I would start to answer your question with, as the pandemic struck us to a point where we felt, and other businesses felt, that based on whether it be governmental guidance or guidance from other leadership like our CEO, that a work from home environment would be the optimal approach to maintain safety and continued business operations. We pivoted to focusing on our performance, but also we understood that in order for our clients to really come back to work in a safe way and open the doors for their employees and remain open, we thought it was very likely that they would need to have support from us for COVID testing. So I'm proud to say that we were the first, amongst the first, if not the first, CRA to have brought that solution into the space. And that landscape of what that solution looks like has been evolving so rapidly, where initially our solution was largely involving a at-home kit delivery in partnership with our partner in providing the service. What we've come to understand is that many of our clients have different scenarios. Some preferred a more controlled environment with a bulk ship onto their location, where we support them in orchestrating on-site events for that testing. Some preferring to do that on-site testing themselves, others preferring that we help provide oversight for that on-site testing, to actually conduct that on-site testing with a third-party employer that we added into the process. Others wanted us to create a solution for them where we were able to aggregate and integrate that data collected from the testing with the other data that we share with our clients for business analytics. And so it really evolved as our solution evolved.
Right.
And we learned more in terms of what kind of support scenarios we needed to support for our clients. So what I see over the course of the next few weeks is based very much on the evolution of the product that's available to us to integrate into our solution set.
Yeah.
So I envision a product that continues to be largely PCR testing. So maybe taking a step back, PCR testing being the detection of the actual virus in it within based on the test taken, as opposed to the antibody.
Right.
And the PCR test right now is essentially the gold standard, and that's what we've seen the need for most often. And we've offered both the nasal test as well as the saliva test. We've seen interest in both, but more so on the saliva test side. And so we're continuing to enhance that solution for an even more integrated experience as part of our platform, and an experience that would allow for either an observed, which is the model we have now,
right,
or an unobserved. And those are some of the kind of right around the bend innovations that are coming down the pike that we'll be bringing to market for our clients.
Yeah, so that's definitely great. Again, what we were seeing at the beginning stages, seeing a couple of months back, and kind of what we're going to see, in the weeks, months to come. So great overview there. So you did touch on many different types of screens, many different types of tests. So we know that there's various amounts of types of screening programs out there. So aside from the ones that you did mention, are you seeing anything else that our clients are looking to implement, or even, maybe non-clients that you're just seeing out there, as an industry standard right now?
Yeah, so I talked about the PCR testing in different types, both the nasal as well as the saliva test. And I also, just to reiterate, talked about the different modes in which those tests are being delivered, with some clients preferring at home and others preferring more on-site. What we anticipate is that as this evolves, there may be interest for antigen testing or the antibody testing. We haven't seen it quite yet, though.
Okay.
But do anticipate that. And then the other thing that clients are thinking about, particularly for employees that have been furloughed for quite some time, or perhaps were even let go or being rehired, is what do they need to do to rescreen employees? So never mind COVID testing,
right?
What do they need to do to rescreen employees that are coming back on board? And so we're providing our clients guidance there. The other area that we are seeing clients design programs for is, for example, schools that we've supported to open their doors to students. In September, they ensure that everyone presented essentially a negative COVID test. But the question has risen, well, what do we do as students show up in classrooms and faculty show up in classrooms? What do we do to ensure ongoing safety? And as we've all seen in the news, you have examples of sports teams that test on a very, very regular basis.
Right.
But that carries with it a certain cost, and so one can argue that probably is the safest approach, to have a very regular cadence of testing, but clients are balancing that need for safety against the cost element, and that's part of what we're also helping clients to establish.
So you touched a little bit on rescreening, like putting aside, health testing. So rescreening still is important, very important to this conversation of like returning, to the workplace, safely, and staying open as well. So you're saying that you're providing guidance to our clients. So what has been the biggest, piece of advice, and I know every client is different, every conversation is different, but when it comes to rescreening, especially for furloughed or laid off employees, is it a 6-month time frame, a 3-month time frame? What is kind of like that standout piece of advice, guidance that we're providing right now?
Yeah, what we have seen from a policy standpoint is that for furloughed employees, we've heard a 6-month time frame from our clients to probably be the most common. Candidly, our recommendation is 90 days if the particular employee hasn't been with you or on site. It's understanding what might have happened in that time period, making sure that as you're bringing employees back in to work, that you keep that front and center, and that you maintain a safe work environment. Never mind COVID, but just in general, is what we recommend as best practice. What we've also been recommending to clients is that since the travel for employees has been more restricted, is that, perhaps rather than if the employee had already been screened, so rather than doing 7 years of address history to inform the criminal background check, what you may do is a 1 year and a current county, along with enhanced nationwide. So that helps you both manage the risk, but also control the costs.
Yeah, that's great. So obviously, organizations, you see the trending hashtags, you see all the articles, it's return to work, getting back into the workplace. But most importantly, too, it's returning to work, it's opening your doors, but it's remaining open. It's staying open and keeping COVID out during this time. So can you talk a little bit and elaborate a little bit more on how companies are accomplishing this, or how they can get started to accomplish this? Get open, stay open, keep COVID out.
Yeah, no, it's a good framing of the question, because one of the things that we have found, and certainly have heard it all in the news, is with some pretty high profile headline cases of both in the higher ed space within education, and within manufacturing, say for food plants, where there have been headline examples of organizations that reopened, but very quickly had to close. And what I think we can all kind of observe from that, and what we found in speaking to clients, is you've got to have a plan. Like you've got to have a plan for what can happen should a infection ultimately turn into a outbreak, either for a cluster or even beyond that, to avoid those situations that have that have hit the headlines. And so the plan can encompass things such as understanding who is most at risk. What populations do you need to screen? Some of our clients, in thinking through that, also think about populations that interface with their clients, that have to continue to interface with their clients to sustain and support the ongoing operation of their business. Other clients, from thinking about like the who needs to be tested, think about the business requirements for that individual's job. So while, of course, as we know, travel has been quite limited, but some businesses have continued to need to travel in order to support and sustain their businesses. And as you may know, Caitlin, there are some states, specifically like Alaska and Hawaii, that require the either a proof of a negative COVID test before entering the state, or 14 days of quarantine. So that falls into the those states include Hawaii, Alaska, Maine, and other states have other restrictions. And so as employers think about the who and develop a plan, they think about the need for that travel and figuring out for employees that have to continue to travel, how to support that process. The what. So part of the plan is also what kind of testing do you want to be doing? So we already talked about the two types, both the nasal as well as the oral. Frankly, the oral testing, having experienced both and tested both before speaking to our clients about it, is certainly less invasive, a bit easier to take, particularly if you're going to be tested on an ongoing basis. And then the when. So when, either from the standpoint of ongoing testing and having a plan of a regimen, or when being because you're required from a travel standpoint and you want to time your testing in concert with the travel requirements to support the needs of your job. So from the standpoint of opening and staying open, it's important to consider the front end of getting employees safely into a workplace and making sure that you understand what and who is coming back in, not only from a COVID standpoint, but also from a background screening standpoint and from the standpoint of remaining open. Having a plan that really speaks to the different populations, their level of exposure, what kind of ongoing testing. And I guess, in direct relation to that, we have also started to talk about our clients, and have, over the course of the last several years, as we provided a more robust solution, a ongoing monitoring program on the criminal aspect as well, because as you well know, you may hire somebody 5 years ago, and you may have a policy around self-disclosure for any arrests, but many of our clients have no means by ensuring that self-disclosure happens. So it's a secondary consideration to the more immediate issue of dealing with COVID in the immediate term, but it's definitely something that we're guiding clients to consider as well from the standpoint of ongoing safety.
So let's talk a little bit about education. So it was sprinkled into the conversation a little bit right now, but it is, it's September 22nd. I think it's technically the first day of fall. So schools reopening, going back to school, remote learning, all of that stuff is definitely trending hot topics right now. So it's obviously a part of the title of the topic today, from factories to classrooms. So let's go ahead and talk about the classrooms, because it's not just returning to the workplace. We're not just returning to the office. We are returning to schools as well. So about 3 weeks ago, we actually ran a poll on our LinkedIn platform, and we asked our audience, would you feel safe sending your children back to school if the students and faculty were regularly tested for COVID-19? So we had 3 options for our audience, and the responses were yes, no, and unsure. So the data is as followed, and over 100 people voted, just so everyone's aware. 38% said yes. 54% said no, they would not feel safe sending their children back, and 8% said they were unsure. So what are your just, initial reaction to this poll and all of this data right here that I just threw at you?
Well, I mean, my initial reaction is that, it's very personal also, being a mother and having, a 7-year-old that just went to school, that I sent off to school, that, I have to say I'm quite pleased that he's going to a school where he's actually physically present there 5 days a week. But it was also very important to me to know what precautions, that school was taking. And so while I obviously fit into the category of the 38% on the yes side, I certainly empathize with the folks that responded, maybe or no. It's certainly a difficult decision, particularly when, as what I've encountered personally, and I know in speaking to some of our clients, in some instances, the testing protocols have been very vague.
Mhm.
And so, what I would want to highlight are some amazing examples of clients that we've been fortunate to support
Mhm.
that have had a very rigorous testing program. And I'm going to mention some names here. Again,
Mhm.
one was actually mentioned in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago, and that's Horace Mann, which is
Mhm.
a private school in New York that leveraged Sterling to do a full, robust initial round of
Mhm.
testing for anyone that was going back into the school. And for those that are interested, I would say certainly look them up online. Their protocol is available right when you hit their website.
Yep.
It's a
Mhm.
very thorough protocol that other private schools also picked up on and leveraged. So I'll speak to another example, which is Packer Collegiate, which also, in very similar vein to what Horace Mann did, leveraged Sterling's program in ensuring that every child, every faculty member
Mhm.
was effectively tested. And there are others like that as well. And we were really pleased to support these clients, understanding the critical need for
Yeah.
parents to know that their kids are going back into a safe environment, and also enabling parents to live their
Yeah.
lives with their kids in school. And so unique considerations included things such as considering consent for
Right.
for minors, which is something that we
Mhm.
handle through our partner and through the school, walking parents through a process that was very new to them, and something that they hadn't done before. And as you can imagine, lots of anxiety and making sure
Yeah.
that it was done on time, and that their kid was able to get back into school. But we had some really good success.
Mhm.
And what we're finding from both the names that I mentioned, as well as other like clients, is the intent to have kits on hand, or testing kits, I should say, on hand, to be responsive to any sort of situation that might prompt the need for
Mhm.
testing. As you may or may not know, many schools are looking at a classroom of kids as a cluster, and
Right.
keeping those kids
Mhm.
together, such that if there is a particular situation with a class, perhaps you test the class and then determine, based on your understanding of contact and things of that nature, as to whether or not you need to test more broadly. But certainly being able to respond very quickly with kits on hand is a strategy we've heard many schools deploy.
So are you seeing any differences? So you did outline some of the unique challenges that, the education industry is seeing. You provided two great examples, from our testing with private schools. So are you seeing any differences between public versus private, higher education versus, like lower education, just like things like that? Like, are there any differences out there, or are they all pretty much facing the same unique challenges?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. And, if any of our higher ed clients are listening, we can help.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, we haven't heard
Mhm.
too much
Mhm.
from our higher ed clients about the need for Sterling
Mhm.
support with COVID testing, but I do know that many are doing it independently in themselves.
Right. Mhm.
Um, and if you have the administrative staff on hand to do that, then great. I mean, you can essentially perform the service on
Mhm.
your own. The benefit of working with Sterling allows you to have somebody that administers this for you, works with all of the stakeholders
Mhm.
in the process, provides you aggregate view of all of the reporting, and manages all aspects of the process for you in terms of turnaround time and the
Right.
like. And so really that's the value add, that's the benefit. We have found, just going back a little bit to the discussion on the factory side, is early on, when those clients that I mentioned early on in the pandemic that were doing temperature checks, they were requiring some of their employees that needed to travel to specific locations to take a COVID test as well. But they
Mhm.
asked the employee to find their own place.
Okay.
And what
That's
they
interesting. Yeah.
realized is that, that gave them less control of the process that they wanted. And so they're revisiting that thinking, and they're asking for what kind of support, for example, we can provide in providing more of a centralized process, more visibility, more management of the employee experience. And that consideration is certainly something that I think applies to schools as well. But more importantly is you have to have a plan, so that you're not one of the examples that we've seen in headline news, so that you can in fact stay open and stay open safely.
Yeah. So definitely, like, what I've taken away from it is, have a plan, keeping the communication open, whether it's with employees, students, faculty, things like that. And then ultimately having a trusted partner at the end of it, really working with someone who is going to partner with you directly to make sure everything is safe. Safety is the key at the end of the day for all of this. So I'm going to take a moment and pause here. So anyone that is listening, watching us right now, if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I will field them over to Alla. But in the meantime, as again, we are waiting for questions if anyone does have any. Any last, final thoughts in regards to our conversation today, Alla?
Sure. So you already kind of recapped the point about the plan. So we hit that a couple of times. I would also reiterate the point that this is a rapidly changing landscape of solutions that are available.
Right.
And so, we're going to continue to communicate that to our clients as soon as we've integrated those solutions into our into what we're offering through our platforms. And, the other thing that I think could be very useful as well, and something that we've strive to do through our verticals and the sub-segments within our verticals, is create communities amongst our clients, so that clients in like industries can talk about what they've been doing and understand how others have been solving that problem. So that is definitely something that others can turn to us to say, hey, you know what, like what have others in the energy segment done, or what are we seeing there? And that's definitely something we'd be delighted to support our clients with.
That's great. So at this time, there are no questions. But again, anyone that is watching right now, you can ask questions at any time on our social media pages. Go to our website. We're always available to help. So again, you can visit us across all of our social media platforms. You can visit us at www.sterlingcheck.com. And again, Alla, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great conversation. And thank you to our audience for joining us as well.
It was a pleasure, Caitlin. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.